On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Federative Republic of Brazil for the statement just made. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United States to introduce an address by the head of state.
On this 75th anniversary of the United Nations, I have the awesome honor of introducing today someone who has taken to heart the core principle that this international organization was founded upon: peace. On September 15th, we all witnessed the results of President Trump's vision and perseverance, which brought Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain together to sign the historic Abraham Accords that unlock a new era for peace in the Middle East. This new era offers the region and all its people the first new hope for peace in a generation, and the United States invites the Palestinians to seize this opportunity to engage in that spirit. Earlier this month, President Trump also brokered economic normalization between Serbia and Kosovo, a breakthrough that charts a course toward reconciliation for the people in the Balkans, a region that has suffered too much bloodshed. On North Korea, the President's fearless vision has shown remarkable progress. President Trump is the first American president to meet with North Korea's leaders. Americans held captive in North Korea have come home. There have been no new nuclear tests, no long-range missile test, a dramatic lowering of the diplomatic temperature in the region, and an opening for a lasting agreement that brings peace to the peninsula. It is clear that when President Trump speaks, world leaders listen closely. In 2018, President Trump used the power of his voice to warn the Assad regime and its Russian and Iranian partners to halt plans to attack Idlib province, a warning they wisely heeded and which spared millions of Syrians from the risk of death and injury. As I sit before you today, the U.S. brokered peace talks between the parties in Afghanistan are underway. Women now occupy positions within the Afghan peace process, and President Trump is convinced there is a clear relationship between women in position of authority, has shown the fortitude necessary to bring together long-standing adversaries to work towards sustainable peace. Through his bold leadership, grit, dogged determination, and an unmatched ability to break through the status quo and make a deal, President Donald J. Trump has delivered on the promises he made to the American people, and the world is more peaceful as a result. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished delegates, fellow ambassadors, and world leaders, my Commander-in-Chief and President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump. Thank you.
It is my profound honor to address the United Nations General Assembly, 75 years after the end of World War II and the founding of the United Nations. We are once again engaged in a great global struggle. We have waged a fierce battle against the invisible enemy, the China virus, which has claimed countless lives in 188 countries. In the United States, we launched the most aggressive mobilization since the Second World War. We rapidly produced a record supply of ventilators, creating a surplus that allowed us to share them with friends and partners all around the globe. We pioneered life-saving treatments, reducing our fatality rate 85% since April. Thanks to our efforts, 3 vaccines are in the final stage of clinical trials. We are mass producing them in advance so they can be delivered immediately upon arrival. We will distribute a vaccine. We will defeat the virus. We will end the pandemic. And we will enter a new era of unprecedented prosperity, cooperation, and peace. As we pursue this bright future, we must hold accountable the nation which unleashed this plague onto the world, China. In the earliest days of the virus, China locked down travel domestically while allowing flights to leave China and infect the world. China condemned my travel ban on their country, even as they canceled domestic flights and locked citizens in their homes. The Chinese government and the World Health Organization, which is virtually controlled by China, falsely declared that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission. Later, they falsely said people without symptoms would not spread the disease. The United Nations must hold China accountable for their actions. In addition, every year, China dumps millions and millions of tons of plastic and trash into the oceans, overfishes other countries' waters, destroys vast swaths of coral reef, and emits more toxic mercury into the atmosphere than any country anywhere in the world. China's carbon emissions are nearly twice what the U.S. has, and it's rising fast. By contrast, after I withdrew from the one-sided Paris Climate Accord, last year America reduced its carbon emissions by more than any country in the agreement. Those who attack America's exceptional environmental record while ignoring China's rampant pollution are not interested in the environment. They only want to punish America, and I will not stand for it. If the United Nations is to be an effective organization, it must focus on the real problems of the world. This includes terrorism, the oppression of women, forced labor, drug trafficking, human and sex trafficking, religious persecution, and the ethnic cleansing of religious minorities. America will always be a leader in human rights. My administration is advancing religious liberty, opportunity for women, the decriminalization of homosexuality, combating human trafficking, and protecting unborn children. We also know that American prosperity is the bedrock of freedom and security all over the world. In 3 short years, we built the greatest economy in history, and we are quickly doing it again. Our military has increased substantially in size. We spent $2.5 trillion over the last 4 years on our military. We have the most powerful military anywhere in the world, and it's not even close. We stood up to decades of China's trade abuses. We revitalized the NATO alliance, where other countries are now paying a much more fair share. We forged historic partnerships with Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador to stop human smuggling. We are standing with the people of Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela in their righteous struggle for freedom. We withdrew from the terrible Iran nuclear deal and imposed crippling sanctions on the world's leading state sponsor of terror. We obliterated the ISIS caliphate 100%, killed its founder and leader, al-Baghdadi, and eliminated the world's top terrorist, Qasem Soleimani. This month, we achieved a peace deal between Serbia and Kosovo. We reached a landmark breakthrough with 2 peace deals in the Middle East after decades of no progress. Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain all signed a historic peace agreement in the White House, with many other Middle Eastern countries to come. They are coming fast, and they know it's great for them and it's great for the world. These groundbreaking peace deals are the dawn of the new Middle East. By taking a different approach, we have achieved different outcomes, far superior outcomes. We took an approach, and the approach worked. We intend to deliver more peace agreements shortly, and I have never been more optimistic for the future of the region. There is no blood in the sand. Those days are hopefully over. As we speak, the United States is also working to end the war in Afghanistan, and we are bringing our troops home. America is fulfilling our destiny as peacemaker, but it is peace through strength. We are stronger now than ever before. Our weapons are at an advanced level like we've never had before, like, frankly, we've never even thought of having before. And I only pray to God that we never have to use them. For decades, the same tired voices proposed the same failed solutions, pursuing global ambitions at the expense of their own people. But only when you take care of your own citizens will you find a true basis for cooperation. As president, I have rejected the failed approaches of the past, and I am proudly putting America first, just as you should be putting your countries first. That's okay. That's what you should be doing. I am supremely confident that next year, when we gather in person, we will be in the midst of one of the greatest years in our history, and frankly, hopefully, in the history of the world. Thank you. God bless you all. God bless America. And God bless the United Nations.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the United States of America for the statement just made. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Turkey to introduce an address by the head of state.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, it is a great honor for me to introduce my President, the President of the Republic of Turkey, His Excellency Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who will deliver a pre-recorded statement.
Sayın Başkan, değerli devlet ve hükümet başkanları, Sayın Genel Sekreter,
Mr. Secretary General, esteemed delegates, I greet you with respect on behalf of myself and my nation. I would like to thank Mr. Mohammed Bande for his successful work at the United Nations during this difficult period. I also wholeheartedly congratulate my former colleague, Ambassador Volkan Bozkır, who has taken over the presidency of the General Assembly. Ambassador Bozkır's election to this post with the support of the overwhelming majority of countries is a sign of his personal qualities as an experienced diplomat and politician, as well as confidence in Turkey. As the first Turkish citizen to undertake the highest-ranking position within the United Nations system, I believe that Ambassador Bozkır will be the voice and conscience of this international community. I have no doubts that he will carry out his duty in a fair and transparent manner. I wish Mr. Bozkır every success in his duty, which he assumes on such a meaningful date as the 75th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations. I think holding the General Assembly under the theme of fight against COVID-19 and multilateralism is a right decision. As Turkey, we stand by our commitments, and we are determined to maintain our support in the fight against COVID-19. The pandemic caught the world at a time when it was having difficulties in coping with various challenges. Globalization, rules-based international system, and multilateralism, which were already the subject of discussions, are now even more questioned under the impact of the pandemic. When we look at the picture in front of us, we need to accurately and sincerely evaluate the full and empty parts of the glass. In the empty part of the glass, there is the need of a reform for multilateral organizations, in particular the United Nations. We have seen how ineffective the existing global mechanisms have been during this crisis. This was so much true that it took weeks, even months, for the Security Council, the most fundamental decision-making body of the United Nations, to include the pandemic on its agenda. At the beginning of the pandemic, a scene emerged where countries were left on their own. Thus, we have once again seen the rightfulness of the world is bigger than five thesis, which I have been advocating for years from this rostrum. The fate of humanity cannot be left at the mercy of a limited number of countries. In order to prevent the loss of reputation of international organizations, we must first review our mentality, institutions, and rules. Effective multilateralism requires effective multilateral institutions. We must rapidly implement comprehensive and meaningful reforms, starting with the restructuring of the Security Council. We must provide the Council with a more effective, democratic, transparent, and accountable structure and functioning. Likewise, we should also strengthen the General Assembly, which reflects the common conscience of the international community. Looking at the full parts of the glass, the United Nations preserves its potential to be the turning point in humanity's quest for peace, justice, and prosperity. Considering that we have not yet overcome the pandemic crisis, we should try to use the institutions and mechanisms we have for multilateral cooperation in the most effective way. Where problems are global, local solutions can only save the day. International solidarity is essential for long-term solutions. In Turkey, since the early days of the outbreak of the crisis, we have called for cooperation in all international platforms. We have been in the forefront of efforts to combat the pandemic in the G20, the Turkic Council, MIKTA, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and other platforms. We reached out to 146 countries and 7 international organizations that requested medical equipment assistance with the understanding that a sure friend is known in unsure times. With the repatriation operations we carried out, we ensured the return of more than 100,000 of our citizens in 141 countries to their homes. With the same flights, we carried more than 5,500 foreigners from 67 countries to their homes. We did not do all these things with the intention of carrying out a coronavirus diplomacy. We did not expect and still do not hope for any compensation from anyone for our aid and repatriation efforts. Standing with the victims and the oppressed is in the veins of our nation and in the essence of our enterprising and humanitarian foreign policy. I once again call for the supply of medical equipment and drugs and vaccine development efforts not to be made an issue of competition. No matter which country they are produced in, vaccines to be made ready for use should be offered to the common benefit of humanity. Dear delegates, with the pandemic, we have once again experienced together how vital elements such as state capacity, effective governance, and resilience are. Behind Turkey's success story lies effective governance mechanisms that we have established with the presidential government system, a high capacity developed by our infrastructure investments in the area of health and qualified human resources. However, the pandemic adversely affected conflict dynamics around the world and increased vulnerabilities. We regret that the United Nations Secretary General's call for a global humanitarian ceasefire, which we also support, has not produced concrete results. As Turkey, we are looking for ways to eliminate threats to our country and humanity by taking any kind of initiative if required. The conflict in Syria, which entered its 10th year, continues to pose a threat to the security and stability of our region. As the country that struck the first and most serious blow against Daesh in the region, we continue to fight against the PKK-YPG terrorist organization. As the international community, we cannot find a permanent solution to the Syrian issue without adopting the same principled attitude and decisive stance against all terrorist organizations. This approach is also essential for ensuring safe and voluntary returns to Syria. The return of more than 411,000 Syrian brothers and sisters to the regions we liberated from terrorist organizations in Syria is the most clear indicator of this. Likewise, thanks to the regions we made secure, we succeeded in preventing that millions of Syrians living in different parts of the country, particularly Idlib, left their homeland. Turkey hosts approximately 4 million Syrians on its own territory for years by addressing all their needs. We also meet the needs of approximately the same number of Syrians on site in the regions that we kept under control, especially in areas close to our border. Ultimately, we are building tens of thousands of briquette houses in Idlib and elsewhere for our brothers and sisters. We carry out all these activities with our own means and with the support of our people. Without a significant support from the international community or international organizations. It should be a priority for all of us to resolve the conflict in Syria on the basis of the roadmap endorsed in the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2254. To this end, the political process initiated under the auspices of the United Nations, which is also Syrian-owned and Syrian-led, should be brought to a successful conclusion. This is the only way that Syria can achieve a lasting peace, while preserving its territorial integrity and political unity. Until this goal is achieved, we are determined to prevent terrorist organizations that intend to pose a threat to our national security, as well as the political unity and territorial integrity of Syria. Today, countries like Turkey, which are hosting the highest number of refugees, save the dignity of all humanity through their sacrifices. However, some states, including some European countries, unfortunately violate the rights of refugees and asylum seekers. It's time for the United Nations to take a firm stand against these violations that corrode the Geneva Convention and the international human rights system. The attacks launched by the coup plotters in Libya last year to overthrow the legitimate government of national accord have brought only pain and destruction to this country. The international community couldn't ensure that neither the coup plotters nor their supporters have been made to account for the massacres, human rights violations, and especially for the mass graves in Tarhuna. Turkey has been the only country to give a concrete response and provide support to the call for help of the legitimate government of Libya. We believe that a permanent political solution in Libya can be established through an inclusive and comprehensive dialogue conducted by the Libyans. It is also under the responsibility of the international community to stop the bloodshed in Yemen, which has been continuing for more than 5 years, and stop the humanitarian crisis. History will not forgive those who covet Yemen's sovereignty, political unity, and territorial integrity with the intention of gaining influence in the region, and those who overlook the continued sufferings of the Yemenis. It is our sincere desire that Iraq does not turn into an area of conflict for external powers, and reaches a position to produce stability and prosperity for our region. While we support our neighbor Iraq in every field, we would like to cooperate more closely, especially in the fight against terrorism. We expect a genuine cooperation from the international community and Iraq concerning the uprooting of the PKK terrorist organization, which has been nested in Iraq, just as it has been the case for Daesh. Clearing the region from terrorist organizations will contribute to the enlightenment of the future of Iraq, which hosts the most ancient geography of humanity. We are in favor of resolving the issues about Iran's nuclear program by taking into account international law through diplomacy and dialogue. I would like to reiterate our call for all parties to abide by their obligations under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which significantly contributes to regional and global security. The order of occupation and oppression in Palestine, which is the bleeding wound of humanity, continues to hurt our consciences. The dirty hand that reaches the privacy of Jerusalem, where the sacred places of the three great religions coexist, is constantly increasing its audacity. The Palestinian people have stood up against Israel's policies of oppression, violence, and intimidation for more than half a century. Upon rejection of the document of surrender, which was tried to be imposed on Palestine under the name of the Deal of the Century, Israel this time accelerated its attempts to have the inside track with the help of its collaborators. Turkey will not support any plan that the Palestinian people do not give consent to. Participation of some countries of the region in this game does not mean anything beyond serving Israel's efforts to erode basic international parameters. Countries that have declared their intention to open embassies in Jerusalem, in violation of the United Nations resolutions and international law, only serve to make the conflict more complicated with their actions. The Palestinian conflict can only be resolved with the establishment of an independent, sovereign, and contiguous state of Palestine, based on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. Seeking solutions other than this are in vain, one-sided, and unjust. Armenia, who attacked the Azerbaijani territories in July, has once again proved that it is the biggest obstacle to lasting peace and stability in the South Caucasus. We are in favor of resolving the conflicts in the region as soon as possible, especially the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, in line with the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Azerbaijan and Georgia, and resolutions of the United Nations and the OSCE. The Kashmir conflict, which is also key to the stability and peace of South Asia, is still a burning issue. Steps taken following the abolition of the special status of Jammu Kashmir further complicated the problem. We are in favor of solving this issue through dialogue, within the framework of the United Nations resolutions, and especially in line with the expectations of the people of Kashmir. Distinguished delegates, behind the tensions existing in the Eastern Mediterranean for a while, there are countries acting with the understanding of winner takes it all. The futile steps to exclude our country have no chance of success. We do not have designs on anyone else's right, remedy, and legitimate interests, neither in the Eastern Mediterranean nor in any other region. However, we cannot turn a blind eye on the violation of the rights of our country and the Turkish Cypriots, and to the fact that our interests are being ignored. The reason for the problems existing in the region today is the one-sided steps taken by Greece and the Greek Cypriots since 2003 with maximalist demands. Turkey is a country that is compelled to shoulder the burden of any negative developments in the Eastern Mediterranean by itself. On the other hand, ignoring our country when it comes to natural resources in the region can be explained neither by wisdom and conscience nor by international law. Our priority is to settle disputes in a sincere dialogue, based on international law and on an equitable basis. However, I would like to clearly state that we will never tolerate any imposition, harassment, or attack in the opposite direction. I would like to repeat here our call for establishing dialogue and cooperation between coastal countries of the Eastern Mediterranean. For this purpose, we would like to propose the convening of a regional conference, including Turkish Cypriots, in which the rights and interests of all the countries of the region are considered. One of the reasons for the crisis in the region is the absence of a fair, comprehensive, and permanent solution to the Cyprus issue during the negotiations that have been continuing intermittently since 1968. The only obstacle to a solution is the uncompromising, unjust, and spoiled approach of the Greek Cypriot side. Ignoring international agreements, the Greek Cypriot side aims to make the Turkish Cypriots a minority in their homeland or even completely exclude them from the island. As a guarantor country, we have never left the Turkish Cypriot people alone in their rightful cause, and we will not leave them in the future. The solution to the Cyprus issue is possible only by accepting the fact that the Turkish Cypriot people are the co-owners of the island. We will support any solution that will permanently guarantee the security of the Turkish Cypriot people and their historical and political rights on the island. Distinguished delegates, this year marks the 75th anniversary of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Disarmament is of vital importance for ensuring global peace and security. In contrast, the architecture of arms control has suffered significant damage in recent years. The international community must move forward on the basis of equality and justice in this regard, eliminating all weapons of mass destruction. Another important issue where we have an obligation to act together is climate change. We see how human interference in the balance of nature can lead to heavy costs. We must stop and reverse this bad course. As Turkey, we sincerely support the efforts in this struggle and fulfill our obligations, even though we have an almost negligible historical responsibility at this point. In the recent past, we hosted the conference of the parties to the United Nations Convention to combat desertification. We have conducted fruitful cooperation with many regions and countries, especially in Africa. We also undertook to host the 16th conference of the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity to be held in 2022. And now I want to draw your attention to a problem that threatens humanity, but for some reason is considered invisible. Racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, and hate speech have reached an alarming level. In the course of the pandemic, acts of violence against vulnerable people, especially migrants and asylum seekers, accelerated while xenophobia and racism increased. Muslims are most exposed to these dangerous tendencies fueled by prejudice and ignorance. Those who are primarily responsible for this dangerous course are politicians who turn to populist rhetoric for the sake of votes and marginal segments who legitimize hate speech by abusing the freedom of expression. I urgently call on all international organizations to take more concrete steps in the fight against this mentality. I reiterate my call for March 15th, the day of the terrorist attack perpetrated in New Zealand against Muslims, to be declared by the United Nations as International Solidarity Day against Islamophobia. As the second largest international organization after the United Nations, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has officially recognized this day. The pandemic and the escalating economic crisis associated with it also have negative effects on sustainable development and on the 2030 goals. Developing countries and countries with low income are more affected by this crisis. In fact, what happened during the pandemic has shown us that sustainable development goals can be an important guide in combating all kinds of global crises. We should also use the transformative power of digitalization in preparing economic prescriptions to survive the crisis. We support the United Nations Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation. We also set the theme of the first Antalya Diplomacy Forum which we have designed to address global and regional issues as diplomacy in the digital age. We also host the United Nations Technology Bank for the least developed countries. Being the easternmost European and the westernmost Asian increases Turkey's specific weight in all areas. With our Asia New initiative, we will give our relations a new dynamism in our current time when the pendulum of history is shifting again towards Asia. We have also gained significant momentum in our relations with Africa, with which we have humanitarian and historical ties connecting our close geographies. We plan to implement projects aimed at strengthening Africa's capacity at the third Turkey-African Union Partnership Summit that we intend to hold in Turkey next year. As I conclude my remarks, I would like to say that our strong support for multilateralism will continue during the sensitive period we are passing through. We must, of course, keep our distance from the pandemic, but we must also close ranks in our joint struggle and cooperation against all the challenges that threaten the international community. We will continue our efforts to transform Istanbul, one of the most prominent cities in the world throughout history, into a regional hub of the United Nations. I wish success in the 75th General Assembly's works. I greet you with respect on behalf of myself and my nation. I wish you the best of health.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Turkey for the statement just made. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of China to introduce an address by the head of state.
主席先生，中国高度重视
China pays great attention to the current session of the General Assembly. In the current world, we are confronted with the severe challenges of COVID-19. We have the problem of unilateralism, protectionism, and bullying practices. The world is at a crossroad. At this moment, the world needs more solidarity and cooperation, but not confrontation. We need to increase mutual confidence and trust, but not the spreading of political virus. China resolutely rejects the baseless accusation against China. These accusations are totally baseless. No matter what others say, China will firmly support multilateralism, supports the United Nations to play its central role in international affairs. Now, I have the honor to present the statement by His Excellency President Xi Jinping of China. Mr. President, colleagues, this year marks the 75th anniversary of the victory in the World Anti-Fascist War and the founding of the United Nations. Yesterday, the high-level meeting to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the UN was held. The meeting was a significant one as it reaffirmed our abiding commitment to the purposes and principles of the UN Charter on the basis of reviewing the historical experience and lessons of the World Anti-Fascist War. Mr. President, we humans are battling COVID-19, a virus that has ravaged the world and has kept resurging. In this fight, we have witnessed the efforts of governments, dedication of medical workers, exploration of scientists, and perseverance of the public. People of different countries have come together with courage, resolve, and compassion which lit the dark hour. We have confronted the disaster head-on. The virus will be defeated. Humanity will win this battle. Facing the virus, we should put people and life first. We should mobilize all resources to make a science-based and targeted response. No case should be missed, and no patient should be left untreated. The spread of the virus must be contained. Facing the virus, we should enhance solidarity and get this through together. We should follow the guidance of science, give full play to the leading role of the World Health Organization, and launch a joint international response to beat this pandemic. Any attempt of politicizing the issue or stigmatization must be rejected. Facing the virus, we should adopt comprehensive and long-term control measures. We should reopen businesses and schools in an orderly way so as to create jobs, boost the economy, and restore economic and social order and vitality. The major economies need to step up micro-policy coordination. We should not only restart our own economies, but also contribute to global recovery. Facing the virus, we should show concern for and accommodate the need of developing countries, especially African countries. The international community needs to take timely and robust measures in such fields as debt relief and international assistance, ensure the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and help these countries overcome their difficulties. 75 years ago, China made historic contributions to winning the world's anti-fascist war and supported the founding of the United Nations. Today, with the same sense of responsibility, China is actively involved in the international fight against COVID-19, contributing its share to upholding global public health security. Going forward, we will continue to share our epidemic control practices as well as diagnostics and therapeutics with other countries, provide support and assistance to countries in need, ensure stable global anti-epidemic supply chains, and actively participate in the global research on tracing the source and transmission routes of the virus. At the moment, several COVID-19 vaccines developed by China are in phase 3 clinical trials. When their development is completed and they're ready for use, these vaccines will be made a global public good and will be provided to other developing countries on a priority basis. China will honor its commitment of providing $2 billion of international assistance over 2 years, further international cooperation in such fields as agriculture, poverty reduction, education, women and children, and climate change, and support other countries in restoring economic and social development. Mr. President, the history of development of human society is a history of our struggles against all challenges and difficulties and our victories over them. At present, the world is battling the COVID-19 pandemic as it goes through profound changes never seen in a century. Yet, peace and development remain the underlying trend of the times, and people everywhere crave even more strongly for peace, development, and win-win cooperation. COVID-19 will not be the last crisis to confront humanity, so we must join hands and be prepared to meet even more global challenges. First, COVID-19 reminds us that we're living in an interconnected global village with a common stake. All countries are closely connected, and we share a common future. No country can gain from others' difficulties or maintain stability by taking advantage of others' troubles. To pursue a beggar-thy-neighbor policy or just watch from a safe distance when others are in danger will eventually land one in the same trouble faced by others. This is why we should embrace the vision of a community with a shared future in which everyone is bound together. We should reject attempts to build blocks to keep others out and oppose a zero-sum approach. We should see each other as members of the same big family, pursue win-win cooperation and rise above ideological disputes and not fall into the trap of clash of civilizations. More importantly, we should respect a country's independent choice of development path and model. The world is diverse in nature. We should turn this diversity into a constant source of inspiration, driving human advancements. This will ensure that human civilizations remain colorful and diversified. Second, COVID-19 reminds us that the economic globalization is an indisputable reality and a historical trend. Burying one's head in the sand like an ostrich in the face of economic globalization or trying to fight it with Don Quixote's lance goes against the trend of history. Let this be clear, the world will never return to isolation, and no one can sever the ties between countries. We should not dodge the challenges of economic globalization. Instead, we must face up to major issues such as the wealth gap and the development divide. We should strike a proper balance between the government and the market, fairness and efficiency, growth and income distribution, and technology and employment, so as to ensure full and balanced development that delivers benefit to people from all countries, sectors, and backgrounds in an equitable way. We should pursue open and inclusive development, remain committed to building an open world economy, and uphold the multilateral trading regime with the World Trade Organization as the cornerstone. We should say no to unilateralism and protectionism and work to ensure the stable and smooth functioning of global industrial and supply chains. Third, COVID-19 reminds us that humankind should launch a green revolution and move faster to create a green way of development and life, preserve the environment, and make Mother Earth a better place for all. Humankind can no longer afford to ignore the repeated warnings of nature and go down the beaten path of extracting resources without investing in conservation, pursuing development at the expense of protection, and exploiting resources without restoration. The Paris Agreement on climate change charts the course for the world to transition to green and low-carbon development. It outlines the minimum steps to be taken to protect the Earth, our shared homeland, and all countries must take decisive steps to honor this agreement. China will scale up its intended nationally determined contributions by adopting more vigorous policies and measures. We aim to have CO2 emissions peak before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. We call on all countries to pursue innovative, coordinated, green and open development for all, seize the historic opportunities presented by the new round of scientific and technological revolution and industrial transformation, achieve a green recovery of the world economy in the post-COVID era, and thus create a powerful force driving sustainable development. Fourth, COVID-19 reminds us that the global governance system calls for reform and improvement. COVID-19 is a major test of the governance capacity of countries. It is also a test of the global governance system. We should stay true to multilateralism and safeguard the international system with the UN at the core. Global governance should be based on the principle of extensive consultation, joint cooperation, and shared benefits so as to ensure that all countries enjoy equal rights and opportunities and follow the same rules. The global governance system should adapt itself to evolving global political and economic dynamics, meet global challenges, and embrace the underlying trend of peace, development, and win-win cooperation. It is natural for countries to have differences. What's important is to address them through dialogue and consultation. Countries may engage in competition, but such competition must be positive and healthy in nature. When in competition, countries should not breach the moral standard and should comply with international norms. In particular, major countries should act like major countries. They should provide more global public goods, take up their due responsibilities and live up to people's expectations. Mr. President, Since the start of this year, we, the 1.4 billion Chinese, undaunted by the strike of COVID-19, and with the government and the people united as one, have made all-out efforts to control the virus and speedily restore the life and economy of normalcy. We have every confidence to achieve our goals within the set time frame to finish the building of a moderately prosperous society in all respects, lift out of poverty all rural residents living below the current poverty line, and meet 10 years ahead of schedule the poverty eradication target set out in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. China is the largest developing country in the world, a country that is committed to peaceful, open, cooperative, and common development. We will never seek hegemony, expansion, or sphere of influence. We have no intention to fight either a Cold War or a hot one with any country. We will continue to narrow differences and resolve disputes with others through dialogue and negotiation. We will not seek to develop only ourselves or engage in zero-sum game. We will not pursue development behind closed doors. Rather, we aim to foster over time a new development paradigm with domestic circulations as the mainstay and domestic and international circulations reinforcing each other. This will create more space for China's economic development and add impetus to global economic recovery and growth. China will continue to work as a builder of global peace, a contributor to global development, and a defender of international order. To support the UN in playing its central role in international affairs, I hereby announce the following steps to be taken by China. China will provide another $50 million to the UN COVID-19 Global Humanitarian Response Plan. China will provide $50 million to the China FAO South-South Cooperation Trust Fund, Phase 3. China will extend the Peace and Development Trust Fund between the UN and China by 5 years after it expires in 2025. China will set up a UN Global Geospatial Knowledge and Innovation Center and an international research center of big data for sustainable development goals to facilitate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Mr. President, colleagues, the baton of history has been passed to our generation, and we must make the right choice, a choice worthy of the people's trust and of our times. Let us join hands to uphold the values of peace, development, equity, justice, democracy, and freedom shared by all of us, and build a new type of international relations and a community with a shared future for mankind. Together, we can make the world a better place for everyone.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the People's Republic of China for the statement just made. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Chile to introduce an address by the head of state.
Señor Presidente, señor Secretario General, tengo el alto honor de presentar.
It is my honor to introduce the statement to be delivered by His Excellency the President of the Republic of Chile, Don Sebastian Pineda Echenique, who will address this General Assembly on the occasion of the 75th session of the General Assembly. Thank you very much.
Señor Presidente de la Asamblea.
President of the General Assembly, Secretary General of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and of government, distinguished delegates. Every generation has been confronted with its own unique set of problems and challenges. For our generation, the problems and challenges ranged against us are particularly taxing and difficult. Some have arisen without warning, such as the coronavirus pandemic and the global economic recession it has brought in its wake. Others were manifest in the past, but have emerged in particularly virulent form in these days, such as climate change and global warming. Confronting the challenges of our generation represents the mother of all battles, because these are battles to ensure our very survival. A scant year ago, nobody could have imagined that an invisible and microscopic virus would unleash